Way out in the northern Ural Mountains, in the middle of a brutal winter, something went horribly, horribly wrong. See, 9 experienced hikers went out on an expedition they were supposed to come back from, but they never did. And what they left behind was a scene so strange, so completely baffling, that it's been haunting people for more than 60 years.
And right there, that's the heart of it. It's not just that they disappeared, it's how. Every clue just pointed to this sudden, overwhelming panic. A panic that makes absolutely no sense.
So, you have to ask, what really happened up on that mountain? To even try and figure that out, we have to rewind. We've got to go all the way back to the very beginning, to the chilling discovery that kicked this whole thing off.
Okay, so let's walk through the timeline. Let's see what led the search parties out into that frozen wasteland in the first place, and what they found when they got there. Now, you have to understand, this was not a group of amateurs. We're talking students and graduates from a top technical university, all of them skilled in this kind of backcountry trekking. Their leader, Igor Dadlov, he was the real deal, experienced, respected. They knew what they were doing, and they were ready for the tough conditions.
So the expedition kicks off just like they planned. But then, February 12th comes and goes. That was their expected return date, and silence. Concern starts to build, and soon it turns into real alarm. It takes another 2 full weeks before searchers finally find their last campsite, on the side of a mountain that the locals ominously call Khalat Sakhel. You know what that means? Dead mountain.
But what this search party discovered, well, it wasn't just an empty campsite. It was a scene of just total chaos, and it raised so many more questions than it could ever hope to answer.
Just stop and think about that for a second. You do not cut your way out of your only shelter in the middle of a blizzard. That's a death wish. Unless the thing you're afraid of outside is so terrifying that you can't even take 2 seconds to open the flap. Or maybe the thing you're running from is already inside with you.
This just makes no logical sense. These were people who knew the mountains. They knew that facing the Siberian cold without the right gear was a death sentence. To leave behind your boots, your coat, your only shelter, it suggests a kind of primal fear that just completely short-circuited all of their training and every survival instinct they had.
And sure enough, the searchers found 9 distinct sets of footprints, just walking away from the tent, down the slope, heading for a forest nearby. It was proof that all 9 of them had left the camp together in that first crazy moment of panic.
But the abandoned tent? That was only the beginning of the mystery, because when they finally found the bodies, things got even weirder. The first few discoveries were tragic, sure, but the ones they found later, they were just impossible.
You see, the first 5 hikers they found, scattered between the tent and the tree line, seemed to have frozen to death. It's a horrible thought, but it makes sense, right? But the last 4, they were found months later buried under the snow in a ravine, and they told a completely different story.
This right here is the absolute core of the mystery. 3 of the hikers had injuries that his doctor said were like being hit by a car. We're talking crushed ribs, fractured skulls. But here's the kicker. Their skin, it was barely even bruised. It was as if some massive invisible force had just squeezed them. And if that wasn't bizarre enough, there was one last, deeply disturbing detail: the missing soft tissue on some of the bodies.
So, how do you even begin to explain any of this? The frantic escape, the impossible injuries that doctors said no person could have inflicted? For decades now, people have been trying to connect all these crazy dots.
And the explanations are all over the map, from the totally scientific to the seriously conspiratorial. Okay, maybe an avalanche explains why they ran, maybe some secret military weapon explains the internal injuries. And some people have pointed to really rare natural events, like infrasound. That's a low-frequency noise that can supposedly make people feel irrational terror. Each theory kind of explains one piece of the puzzle, but none of them seem to explain the whole shebang.
Today, the most accepted scientific theory is something called a slab avalanche. The idea is pretty simple, actually. The hikers dug into the slope to set up their tent, but they didn't know that they just weakened a big, thick layer of snow right above them. So, later that night, a heavy slab of snow just slid down. It didn't bury them completely, but it hit the tent with this heavy, crushing blow. A blow that could have caused those insane internal injuries and definitely would have triggered a panicked escape. But here's the thing. Even with a pretty solid theory like the avalanche, a lot of parts of the story just don't feel right to researchers, and especially not to the families. And that's exactly why this case just refuses to go away.
So for decades, nothing. The case went completely cold.
Then, out of the blue, more than 60 years after it happened, the Russian government reopened the investigation. They were hoping to finally, once and for all, put the whole thing to bed.
A slab avalanche, made worse by bad weather and low visibility. And with that, case closed. Officially, it was just a natural, tragic event. As far as the authorities are concerned, the file is stamped, put on a shelf, and the story is over.
But does it really? Does an avalanche explain the missing soft tissue? Can it really account for catastrophic internal injuries with almost no external marks? You know, the official answer might close the case, but it doesn't solve the mystery. And it's right there, in that gap between what we know and what we fear, that the Dyatlov Pass incident just continues to live on.